Well, hello everyone from our apartment here in Catania. So we've pretty much come to the end of the trip. We're going back home tomorrow. Mum is over there knitting. And in this video, I want to talk about the most important things that have had the biggest impact on my photography. Everything that I share in this video is practical. There's no theory, there's no go and work hard or any of this type of advice. It's stuff that you can literally go and do right now after watching this video. There'll be examples as well. This video is sponsored by Squarespace, and as you can see, my hair hasn't grown back yet. Actually, it's a funny story. I was trimming my face and then I thought, let me just tidy up my hair because it obviously grows quite quickly when it's this short. I forgot to change the guards, which means I took it even shorter. This was a couple of days ago, and as you can see, I'm basically bald. So far, the buzz cut look is proving to be a bit of a challenge, but I think we'll get there. Anyway, I'm waffling, so let's get into the first point, which in my opinion is one of the most overlooked things when it comes to taking photos. Now picture this, you're walking around town, you see a really nice scene, great light, you take the photo, everything is good, but then when you look at this image later, you find that the subject seems to get a little bit lost. Now, you can find the subject straight away. However, if you show that photo to someone else, they might struggle to find the subject because it's lost within the grand scene. This happens more often than you think because when you see something, you're focused in on that. And when you take the photo, even if that thing is blended in with the rest of the image, you can still pinpoint it straight away because you know exactly what you're looking for. If someone is looking at your image for the first time, they need to be almost slapped in the face with what the subject is. Now, whether you use lighting, composition, whatever method to get there, the end result is the same, that your subject needs to be very clear and very obvious straight away in order to capture the viewer's attention. Let me show you a few examples of when this doesn't work very well. This photo here is from Brighton, and what I was going for is there's this wonderful light, and as you can see towards the right side of the image, there's a guy standing there with a nice bit of rim lighting. Now I can see it because I remember seeing that scene and thinking, oh, that looks quite cool. But when I showed it to someone else, they couldn't find the subject straight away because the subject was completely blended in with the background. Another example is this photo in Sicily, and you have a dog towards the kind of bottom right hand side. You've got some nice buildings, nice light, this old van towards the left. The subject of this particular photo was the dog. However, if you look at the scene as it is, you'll probably struggle to see the dog straight away unless you're looking for it. Now, you are looking for the dog because I've just told you, but if I didn't tell you, you might kind of just look around and go, oh, nice buildings, nice light, pretty boring photo, and move on. Whilst I was going for the sleeping dog here, that sounds really weird. As you could see, it's completely lost in the scene and it just doesn't work. Next example is also from Sicily, and it was in Palermo. I was walking around the old street and I heard someone kicking a football against the wall. Looked down along the street and there was this kid kicking the football against the wall, and I thought, what a cool little scene. However, the kid is completely lost, and if I didn't tell you that there is a kid right there kicking this football against the wall, you probably wouldn't even notice it. There's so much noise, there's so much detail. The whole photo is a mess, and whilst the subject under the right conditions can look incredible, under these conditions it's completely and utterly lost. And if I showed this photo to someone else and I didn't tell them that, you know, this is what you should be looking for, they'll just look at it and go, yeah, busy European city in the sun, that's it. Now let me show you how a very small adjustment can make a huge difference. So right now you can see a photo of a guy sitting between two palm trees. However, as you can see, the guy is actually kind of blended in with all the noise in the background, and you really have to kind of look around the scene to try and figure out what's going on. However, if all you do is just take your camera, because that photo was taken at eye level, just raise it up a little bit, what you'd get is the guy is actually silhouetted against the sand. Therefore, it's much easier for your eyes to spot the subject, which is the guy sitting between the two palm trees. So something as small as just lifting the camera up a little bit can make such a huge difference, positive difference, to the photo. While we're all aiming to get that one Instagram 5-star banger, so to speak, the reality is very different. To get those once-in-a-lifetime shots, you need to be incredibly lucky, like incredibly lucky. So for example, here's a photo of Mount Etna that I took 3 days ago, and it was pure luck. There was no planning. Obviously, we were told, that it might erupt, and luckily it did. I grabbed the camera, ran out, set a timer, took a few shots, waited, and I got lucky with this particular photo. However, people have messaged me and said they've been trying to get this shot for a few years and they couldn't get it. Now, in order to make sure that luck is in your favor, rather than just going for that one Instagram banger, try to put luck in your own hands by going for 3 photos instead of 1. You get to a particular location, always think in 3 photos. So 1 is your wide angle establishing shot, 2 is your medium subject shot, and 3 is your tight detail shot. The wide establishing photo is literally there to tell the viewers where you are, what's going on, roughly, to give them an idea and to set the scene. The medium subject photo is there to showcase what's interesting within the scene, what subjects. It could be the people, animals, cars, whatever it might be. And then the tight detailed photo is there to showcase intricate details or certain viewpoints that you might otherwise not see. Now, those tight detail shots on their own might not be particularly strong, but when combined with all the other photos, then it creates a very compelling photo set. In other words, you want to be making photo sets rather than going for, an Instagram banger, so to speak. And the reason for that is because you'll be taking more photos, you'll be working the scene, and the chances of you getting that one amazing photo will be considerably higher than just going out with the mindset of I need to get one amazing shot. Let me show an example using St. Paul's Cathedral in London. So the opening shot is me standing, I forgot the name of the street, I'll write it down here, but you can see an amazing view of St. Paul's. Straight away sets the scene, you know where you are, what's in front of you, and it looks pretty cool. Moving on, you have the subject photo. This is taken from the top of one New Chain shopping centre, and you have a photo of this lady overlooking St. Paul's Cathedral. Now you have a bit more perspective, you have a bit more kind of knowledge about what it looks like and scale, and overall it's a pretty cool subject photo. And lastly, there's a detail photo, and this is me standing just underneath St. Paul's and kind of shooting up using these buildings to frame the top. Now, on its own, this particular shot wouldn't be that strong, in my opinion. However, when it's put together into this photo set, all of a sudden, it actually works. Always look for ways to add layers to your photos. Layers are your background, your midground, and your foreground. Different people like to do different things. Personally, I love putting foreground elements in front of my lens, therefore creating depth and effectively putting you, the viewer, in the photo. The reason I like to do that is because you can also use foreground elements to add context. You can use it to block noisy parts of the image, just clean up the overall composition. And in my opinion, those photos just feel a little bit more three-dimensional. Of course, you don't want to do it on every single image, but now and again, it can really make a difference. Let me show you some examples. This photo was taken during, I think it was some kind of a procession or a parade. This guy from the church was walking out, and you have the police or the army people on the left-hand side. They are out of focus. The focus is on the guy walking out, and this creates an overall depth that you wouldn't have if you just took the photo of the guy on his own walking out. Next example is in Vietnam, and there was a fisherman who was cleaning all the nets. So the nets were in a pile on the sand, and he was pulling them into the boat and cleaning them. And what I've done is I've used the nets as the foreground, and then I've put the guy in the kind of top left of the image. Because the nets are slightly out of focus, it's creating that depth that you wouldn't get if you simply just took a flat photo of the guy. And the next example is of this lady. This was Hanoi, I believe. And basically she was standing there. She had a really cool hat, a very clean suit as well. And where she was standing, you can get a nice kind of contrast against the pavement. However, there was a lot of noise in a particular area. We were behind the fence, and I thought, well, can I get her within the fence. So I moved around and I used the fence as a way to add a foreground element and effectively frame her and clean up the area around. If you've been watching this channel for a while, you'll probably be sick of me saying this, but lighting is everything. Personally, I like to shoot into the light or at least 90 degrees into the light. So the light is coming directly in front of me or 90 degrees or anywhere kind of within that 180 degree in front of me. The reason for it is because it creates the most, in my opinion, dynamic photo possible, because you add a lot of contrast, you add a lot of shading, and overall it makes the photos look more cinematic. You know, it's an overused word, but I think you know what I'm trying to say. It can clean up the photo. If there's loads of detail, it can hide it in the shadows. And generally speaking, it creates the most pleasing result, at least for me. If you look at a lot of movies, especially very kind of cinematic movies, you will see that a lot of the most beautiful scenes are actually backlit or sidelit. Here's an example from Vietnam. You've got these two fishermen about to go out into the sunset and hopefully catch some fish. And as you can see, the sun is right behind them and it's wrapping around the boat, the fishermen, and it's adding a lot of texture and depth that you wouldn't have if you were shooting the other way. Next example is Victoria Station in London. In the winter, Victoria Station gets some insane light, and here is no exception. So the light was just flooding in. You had these two pigeons walking around, the train was just pulling away, and overall it's a very pleasing high contrast image because the light is coming from behind the subject. And last but not least, there was this photo in Morocco. It was in a Marrakesh market, I believe. No, Fez, sorry. And as I was walking around, there was loads of little spotlights. And I saw this guy, this butcher, and there was a spotlight coming between two guys that were standing there. And one of them was talking with his hands quite a lot. So I managed to get that shot. And it's the fact that you have a strong spotlight behind his hand that adds this really kind of dynamic appearance to the image, so to speak. If this was lit from behind me, it just wouldn't work. I'd like to take a moment and thank Squarespace for sponsoring this video. I've been using Squarespace for over 5 years as my online photography portfolio, where I share my best work from all the trips and shoots. Having an online portfolio is important because it's your little corner of the internet that you can arrange however you like. I would also encourage everyone to start an online blog about their photography. Having a blog is the best way for your website to stay relevant on Google because there's fresh content always being uploaded. Not to mention, it's a great way for your website to become more searchable through SEO. Squarespace offers powerful blogging tools that will allow you to publish blogs from anywhere on any device. Squarespace also offers powerful analytics that help you understand where your readers are coming from and what they're searching for. If you're an aspiring photographer, having your own website is important because it will elevate you from everyone else. For a free trial followed by 10% off your first purchase, please use the link in the description or use code RomanFox when you check out. Thank you for Squarespace for sponsoring, and thank you for watching. Now, this isn't something you want to use in every single photo unless that's your thing. However, from time to time, adding motion to your shots in scenarios where using motion can actually exaggerate what's going on in the image, that can really elevate your overall photo set. So to do that, I will set the camera into shutter priority mode and I will start at 1/30th of a second. I typically find that to be a very good starting point to get a little bit of motion. Now, I would go down to 1/8th of a second to get even more motion and a bit more kind of in-camera movement style look. However, anything below that can pretty much ruin images. So 1/30th is a good starting point. And then if something is happening in the scene that I think deserves to have some motion, then I will pan, I will do various camera movements, I can twist it. You just play around with it. I can't tell you exactly what you need to do because it's so situational, but you just have to play around and kind of figure out what works for you and what you like. Let me show you a couple of examples. This is a little Fiat 500, the old one, driving through Italy. I saw him driving past and I just wanted to get a motion blur shot of him because it exaggerates the motion. And in this particular case, it works well. Moving down, this is a photo from Spain. Can't remember exactly where. And same thing, I was sitting in a cafe and there were loads of scooters going by, and I wanted to get a bit of a motion blur effect on the scooters. And last but not least is a boy running through Fez Market. There were Fez is packed. If you've ever been there, the streets are tight, it's really busy, and now and again you'll have kids just running straight through. And I wanted to capture that. Now, of course, you could just freeze one of the kids running through, but it just wouldn't have the same effect. Whereas this kind of shows the speed at which the kids are running and creates that kind of chaos or chaotic look, so to speak, to really exaggerate that point. Something else that you can sprinkle into your photo set are diffusions and reflections. Again, unless it's your specific style and thing, I would only sprinkle them in. I wouldn't make them your entire portfolio, again, unless it's something that you specifically want to do. Let's start with reflections. Pretty easy. This is where you can use windows, puddles, cars, pretty much any surface that creates a reflection to add a completely different dimension. A very popular one is you're shooting puddles and then kind of flipping the image upside down. Again, there's nothing I can particularly tell you to go and do in order to get a specific result, because each reflection is different. I would start with the puddles and then flipping them upside down. That usually works. I would look at, obviously, windows, mirrors, any reflective surface. Also try to look for glass, which is kind of curved. I'll show you an example now. Where the glass is curved, you can create some really unique looks that you wouldn't otherwise get in a normal reflection. So again, something to look out for. Or find little mirrors and then use those mirrors to add another dimension to a photo, where the photo is not the reflection itself, but it's just a part of it is. Let me show an example. This photo is just outside the Hilton, and you can see the guys cleaning the mirrored sign with the name on it. And you can just about tell his face, and the rest of the obviously image is not a reflection. So something like this can be quite cool to do. Now, diffusion is another thing you can add. Diffusion can be many things. You can shoot through a piece of plastic, for example, create a textured look. You can also shoot in a foggy morning, and that's diffusion. You can say if you're shooting in a busy market, look out for anyone that's grilling some meat, and then you can have loads of smoke. And that adds another element, another layer of diffusion to your photo. So this particular example in front of me was taken right in Palermo, and the guy was just grilling all this meat, and it was filling this whole area with smoke. This also actually happened to me in Fez as well, and I got some of my favorite photos from those particular situations where you had strong, good light, people walking through or things moving around, and a bunch of smoke from grilling or steam or whatever it might be. Color is a very subjective topic. I'm not here to tell you that these colors work better than those. Instead, what I want to share is to try and keep the colors in your photo down to 3 at absolute maximum. The more colors you start to add to your photo, you're creating a color salad, and then it becomes a bit of a mess. What I personally like to do is have no more than 3 primary colors that take all your attention. 2 even better, but 3 usually is a good amount. So let me show you a few examples here. There's a Vietnam, guys cleaning the street. You've got green, blue, and orange. You don't have any other colors competing for your attention, and it's a pretty clean photo. Moving down is a photo from the ferry in New York, and there are 2 primary colors. You've got various shades of blue and various shades of orange as well. Moving down, this is also from New York, and you've got a van with red, orange, and blue. When you start to add more than 3 colors, you can create a visual mess. Now, if your scene does have more than that, and it works, that's great. If it does look a little bit all over the place, what you can do is use the HSL tool to try and bring some of the colors closer together and at least remove some of that distraction. So for example, if your image has a bunch of blues and purples and you need to get rid of one of them, what you can do is go into the purples slider, the hue, and move it more towards blue. Now, of course, it must look natural. If it clearly doesn't look natural, then it's not going to work. But if you can get away with it, that's one way to just remove some color and just reduce the total visible colors to 3 or less. If you watched one of my last videos, this will sound familiar. However, if you're shooting anything that has straight lines, anything that's like a building or an object or a 3D thing, shoot into the corner, because what that will do is add depth. So for example, if you're shooting inside of a cafe or a restaurant, shoot into the corner, and then all the leading lines are kind of going in and just creating more depth. Even this particular video, if you look behind me, I am not sat flat in the room. There's the corner there, and all the lines are kind of going into the corner. And overall, that will create a more dynamic and interesting photo. Of course, there are plenty of scenarios where shooting something flat does work, but in my experience, shooting into the corner is one of the best hacks, I hate that word, but you know what I mean, in order to get a more interesting image. And the last aspect of this video is all about balance. So when we talk about composition, you have leading lines, framing, a bunch of other things that you can do in order to improve your composition. However, over the last 7 years of photography, the single biggest tool, or biggest, let's just say, way of looking at composition that's helped me the most is balance. What I mean by that is a properly composed image is a well-balanced image. So in a typical photo, you'll have a bunch of different elements. You'll have shadows, highlights, negative space, and details. Your job as a photographer is to make sure that all those elements balance each other out. It's not as simple as just dividing it by 4 though, because highlights will command more of your attention, whereas shadows command less. Details and negative space is roughly about the same. So what that means is, if you're, let's say, looking at a photo with a highlight area and a shadow area, the shadow area will have to be a bit bigger because it commands less visual weight. Therefore, you'll need to be physically bigger in order to balance the highlight out. Let me show you some examples and this will make a lot of sense. In this photo right now, this was again Tokyo. As you can see, you have a strong highlight area towards the right, and you have a very, very large shadow area towards the left. Also, the highlight area has a bunch of detail, like the zebra crossing, the man walking, whereas the shadow detail is all negative space. Right now, the image is properly balanced. The amount of shadow is correct for the amount of highlights in the image. However, now let's just imagine that we've added too much shadows. We've composed it differently, and there is this huge shadow area, and it's just way too big for the highlight area. Automatically, your eyes are just going towards the shadow area and not the subject, which is in the highlight area, and the image overall feels a little bit heavy towards the left. Equally, if we now look at an image where there's too many highlights and not enough shadows to balance it out, now the image just feels too right side heavy because there's just simply too much highlight area. And if we go back to the properly balanced image, now everything kind of balances each other out and the image doesn't lean too much to one side or the other. Now let me show you another example, and this is a mountain bus in Etna. So you get the cable car up to a certain point if you don't want to hike, and then from there you can even pay for a little like crazy mountain volcano bus to take you up a little bit higher, and then you have to kind of hike the rest. Anyway, so right now this image is made up of 2 key components. There isn't a huge amount of shadow and highlight going on, but you have negative space in the sky and you have detail lower down in the image. As it stands, it balances out very well. There's enough details and enough negative space to kind of feel like the image is properly balanced and you're looking at the bus. Now, let's just say that there is too much negative space in the sky. There's too much sky. Now the image feels like it's top heavy. It feels like it's gonna, fall from kind of the top down. And automatically your eyes are just looking at the sky. They're not even paying attention to the bus as much because there's just too much negative space and not enough detail to balance it out. On the other hand, if you remove too much sky and add too much detail, the opposite happens. The image is bottom heavy. And now it feels like the bus is just surrounded by too much noise and the image just feels a little bit off. And the reason it feels a little bit off is because it's not balanced, because there's just too much detail and not enough negative space. I'm aware I've rushed for quite a lot of these points, but that's because I've made dedicated videos for pretty much most of them that I have linked down below, so do check that out. And also, if you want me to go into even more detail and elaborate on things a lot more, please check out my photography book where I do that. But with that said, everything I've mentioned in this video has been absolutely crucial to my photography and has made the biggest difference to my photography over the last 7 years. Everything I've mentioned, you can go out and practice right now. For the composition, you don't even need to go out. You can just recrop old images and see what works and what doesn't. Fundamentally though, the only thing that will really make a difference, aside from this, is time behind the camera taking photos. So take what I've just shared with you. If it applies to you, great. If you think it doesn't work, that's also okay. Take what actually works for you and what resonates with you, go out, take some more photos, and I am 99.9% sure that at least 1 or 2 of these will have a positive impact on your photography. Okay, hopefully that was useful to you. I apologize for the echo. Unfortunately, because I don't have my own YouTube talking head space, there's not much I can do about it because the camera is currently mounted on a bowl. There is also an aircon unit in here somewhere that I hope this mic can remove, but it is what it is. Maybe in the future I can have a more professional looking space. Maybe more hair as well. Right, that's it. Thank you so much for watching the video, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye bye.